The Season 1 finale of Dutton Ranch just changed everything you thought this show was about. And the door it opened for Season 2, Episode 1, might be the most dangerous chapter Beth and Rip have ever walked into. For 8 episodes, one question hung over Dutton Ranch like a storm that refused to break. Who destroyed the Dutton herd? The foot-and-mouth outbreak that gutted their cattle felt random at first, almost like bad luck dressed up as tragedy. But nothing on this show is ever just bad luck, and the season finale, titled El Padrino, finally gave us the answer nobody was ready for. Ranch hand Austin sits Beth, Rip, and Zachariah down and tells them the truth. The virus that wiped out their herd did not come from nowhere. It came from 10 Petal Ranch, from an illegal cross-border livestock smuggling operation that had been running quietly along the Mexican border the entire time. Whether it was outright sabotage or just catastrophic negligence, the finale leaves that specific detail open, but the effect is the same either way. The Duttons lost everything because of the ranch next door, and every tense conversation Beth ever had with Beulah Jackson across that fence line suddenly reads completely differently in hindsight. This was never a rivalry between two proud families. This was a crime scene the whole time, and Beth just didn't know it yet. That alone would be enough to build a season around, but El Padrino keeps peeling the layers back. Rip doesn't stop digging once he understands the smuggling operation, and what he finds underneath the cattle trafficking is worse. Evidence starts pointing toward drugs moving through the same border pipeline. In one of the finale's sharpest confrontations, Rip corners Rob Will, Beulah's volatile son, and asks him directly if he's running drugs through that ranch. Rob Will doesn't hand Rip a clean confession, and the show is smart enough not to force one. But the evidence Rip walks away with is damning enough on its own, and it tells him this operation goes far beyond stolen cattle. This is now a full smuggling network with narcotics running through it, sitting right on the Duttons' doorstep. And here's where the show does something that separates it from a dozen other revenge dramas. Beth doesn't reach for a gun. She reaches for paperwork. Rip's discovery hands her a weapon far more dangerous in her hands than in his, and she gets to work building a legal and financial case against 10 Petal Ranch using the forged documents at the center of their own operation. That's always been Beth Dutton's signature move, and it's worth sitting with for a second. Rip solves problems with his hands. Beth solves them with contracts, lawsuits, and paper trails that end careers and dismantle empires from the inside. Watching her pivot from grief over her herd to a calculated legal offensive is one of the finale's quieter moments, but it might be the one that shapes Season 2 the most. Because by the time the credits roll, Beth isn't playing defense anymore. For the first time all season, she's holding the weapon. While Beth builds her case, the Jackson family is falling apart from the inside, and this is where the finale earns its name. Beulah Jackson survived the heart attack that nearly took her in Episode 8. She gets airlifted out and pulls through, but surviving physically is not the same as surviving politically, and that distinction matters enormously here. Before her collapse, Beulah made a decision that would have been controversial in any family, let alone one running a ranch worth this kind of money. She left 10 Petal Ranch to her son Rob Will instead of to Joaquin, the man who had served her loyally for years and, by every unspoken rule of that world, expected to inherit it. That single decision fractures the Jackson family beyond repair, and Joaquin does not take the betrayal quietly. Feeling discarded after everything he gave that ranch, he makes a move in the finale that changes the entire shape of the show going forward. He brings in Mariano, a dangerous outside figure with a history tied to the Jackson family that predates the Duttons' arrival in Texas entirely, and Joaquin recruits him with one specific purpose: eliminate the Duttons from Rio Paloma. This is the moment El Padrino stops being a season finale and starts feeling like the opening chapter of something much bigger. Mariano isn't loyal to Beulah. He isn't loyal to Rob Will. He answers to nobody currently established in that world, which means Beth and Rip are about to face an enemy with no existing relationship to exploit, no old debt to call in, no history they can use against him. Every threat they've handled so far in Texas has come from people playing by rules the Duttons at least understood. Mariano is something new entirely, and the title of the episode, which translates to The Godfather, isn't just flavor text. It's the show telling you exactly what kind of power just walked onto the board. Carter's story in the finale moves at a completely different volume than everything happening with the Jacksons, and that contrast is deliberate. After a season built on grief, bad decisions, and a young man who kept running from the one family that actually wanted him, Beth finally does something she's resisted for 9 episodes. She acknowledges Carter as family, out loud, without qualification. It's a small moment compared to smuggling rings and cartel-adjacent fixers, but on this show, small moments like that carry weight, because Beth Dutton does not hand out that kind of acknowledgement easily. What the finale doesn't resolve is what Carter does with it. Does he lean into what the Dutton name is about to demand of him, especially with Mariano now circling the family? Or does the weight of that name push him right back toward running? That question is left completely open, and it's one of the more interesting threads heading into the next chapter, because Carter has spent the whole first season figuring out who he is outside of tragedy. Now he has to figure out who he is inside a war. Zoom out for a second and look at where every major player actually stands once the dust settles. Beulah is alive, but she's weakened, and weakened is a dangerous condition for someone who built an empire on fear and control. Rob Will is technically in charge of 10 Petal Ranch now, but he's volatile, and volatile leadership tends to invite exactly the kind of chaos that gets exploited by smarter, calmer people standing just outside the family. Joaquin has already turned, and he didn't just walk away quietly. He brought in outside firepower specifically built to end the Duttons. That means the Jackson family isn't just divided anymore, it's exposed on every side at once, vulnerable to Beth's legal offensive from one direction and destabilized by its own internal betrayal from the other. This is precisely the kind of collapse Beth Dutton has built a career out of recognizing and exploiting, and it sets up a genuinely fascinating dynamic for Season 2. The Duttons might not even need to be the primary aggressors. The Jackson Empire may end up doing a significant amount of the damage to itself. Then there's Mariano, and it's worth being honest about how little is actually confirmed regarding him so far, because that mystery is exactly what makes him effective as a villain. What we do know is that he isn't affiliated with 10 Petal Ranch in any official capacity. He has a history connected to the Jackson family that stretches back before the Duttons ever set foot in Rio Paloma, and he was brought in for one explicit purpose: to remove Beth and Rip from Texas entirely. Everything else about him, his methods, his resources, how far he's willing to go, remains deliberately unanswered heading into the next season. That's a smart choice from the writers, because it means Season 2 isn't obligated to retread the same conflict Season 1 just wrapped up. This is a brand new hierarchy of power in Rio Paloma, one that doesn't care about the history between the Duttons and the Jacksons at all. Beth and Rip left Montana believing the fight was behind them. What El Padrino makes painfully clear is that the fight simply relocated, and it's about to arrive wearing a completely unfamiliar face. Now let's talk about what's actually confirmed for what comes next, because there's real, verified news here worth separating from speculation. Paramount Plus renewed Dutton Ranch for a second season on June 24, 2026, and the timing of that renewal says a lot on its own. It happened 9 days before the Season 1 finale even aired, which almost never happens in this industry. That kind of confidence usually only comes from hard numbers, and in this case, the numbers back it up completely. Season 1 pulled in 12.9 million global viewers in its first 7 days, making it the biggest original series launch in Paramount Plus history. That's not a modest hit. That's a statement. There is a significant behind-the-scenes shift worth knowing about too. Chad Feehan, who created the series and served as Season 1 showrunner, exited the project just weeks before the premiere, reportedly following friction between him, cast members, Taylor Sheridan, and studio leadership. Stepping into that role for Season 2 is Benjamin Cavell, a writer with real credibility in this exact kind of tense, character-driven drama. Cavell created and executive-produced SEAL Team, and his writing credits include Justified, Homeland, The Stand, Sneaky Pete, and Godfather of Harlem. That's a resume built almost entirely around high-stakes tension and morally complicated characters, which makes him a genuinely interesting fit for a show that just introduced a villain with no known limits. As for the cast, Kelly Riley and Cole Hauser are expected to return as Beth and Rip, and based directly on how the finale positions its storylines, Annette Bening as Beulah, Ed Harris as Everett, and Finn Little as Carter are all expected back as well. One name will not be returning. Jai Courtney's character, Rob Will, is dead by the end of the finale, which removes one of the more unpredictable pieces from the board heading into Season 2 and leaves a real leadership vacuum inside the Jackson family. So when will Dutton Ranch actually come back? Here's the honest answer, and it's important to be straight with you instead of inventing a date just to sound exciting. As of right now, no premiere date has been officially announced, and production on Season 2 has not yet begun. Paramount Plus has confirmed the renewal and confirmed Benjamin Cavell as showrunner, but the actual filming schedule is still to be determined. Based on the production timelines of other shows in the Taylor Sheridan universe, which typically take somewhere between 12 and 18 months to turn around between seasons, the realistic expectation right now points toward a premiere sometime in mid to late 2027. That's not a confirmed date, and anyone telling you otherwise right now is guessing. But given how aggressively Paramount Plus moved to renew this show before the finale even aired, don't be surprised if updates on filming and casting start rolling out sooner rather than later. What we do know with certainty is exactly where the story stands. The Duttons no longer have a mystery to solve. They have a name, a motive, and a location. The virus that destroyed their herd, the drug operation hiding underneath it, and the man now being sent to remove them from Texas entirely are all out in the open. That shift completely changes the emotional register going into Season 2. Season 1 was about Beth and Rip trying to understand what they were up against while grieving what they'd lost. Season 2 begins with them already knowing the answer, and knowing tends to be far more dangerous than not knowing, especially for two people who have never once backed away from a fight once they understood who they were fighting. Think about the position each side is actually in right now. Beth is holding a legal case built on the Jacksons' own forged documents, and if there's one thing this franchise has taught us across every single spin-off, it's that Beth Dutton with paperwork is more terrifying than most people with weapons. Rip has confirmation that this operation runs drugs, not just cattle, which raises the stakes from a property dispute into something federal law enforcement would take very seriously if it ever came to light. Meanwhile, the enemy camp is falling apart from within. Beulah is alive but diminished. Rob Will is dead, leaving a power vacuum nobody has clearly filled. Joaquin has already betrayed the family that raised him, and the man he brought in to finish the job answers to no one currently on the board. That is an enormous number of moving pieces heading into a single season, and almost none of them are stable. And that instability is exactly what makes Mariano such a compelling threat on paper. A villain with a clear agenda and a predictable playbook is manageable. A villain who is genuinely unknown, with a history nobody has explained yet and loyalties that exist entirely outside the world the Duttons understand, is something else entirely. Season 1 spent 9 episodes building rivals the Duttons could read, predict, and eventually outmaneuver. Mariano breaks that pattern completely, and that alone might be the smartest thing this finale did. It didn't just raise the stakes. It removed the map. There's also something worth sitting with about Carter heading into this next chapter. Beth spent an entire season keeping people, even her own family, at arm's length while she processed loss after loss. The moment she finally acknowledges Carter as family isn't loud, and it isn't dressed up with a big speech. It just happens, quietly, the way the most meaningful moments on this show usually do. But it lands right before the family is about to face its most dangerous threat yet, and that timing feels far too deliberate to be coincidence. Whether Carter steps fully into what that name now requires of him, or whether the weight of it sends him running again, might end up being one of the most human threads running underneath all the smuggling and cartel politics in Season 2. At its core, this is still a story about what people are willing to protect and what they're willing to become in order to protect it. Beth and Rip left Montana believing they were finally done fighting for land, for family, for the right to simply exist without someone trying to take it from them. Rio Paloma was supposed to be a fresh start. Instead, it turned into a different version of the exact same war, with a new name attached to it and a threat neither of them saw coming until it was already standing at their door. That's what makes this finale land the way it does. It's not just a cliffhanger for the sake of a cliffhanger. It's a reminder that for this family, peace has never been permanent, only borrowed. So here's where I want to hear from you. Do you think Mariano ends up being the most dangerous threat the Duttons have ever faced, or do you think the real war in Season 2 comes from inside the Jackson family collapsing on itself? And what do you think Carter does with the weight Beth just handed him? Drop your theory in the comments, because I genuinely want to see what you're all predicting before any of this is confirmed. If this breakdown helped you make sense of everything the finale set up, do me a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this video reach more people who are just as invested in this story as you are. And if you want to be here the moment any real Season 2 news drops, filming updates, casting news, and actual release date, make sure you're subscribed, because this is far from over. Beth and Rip just found out who they're really fighting. Now we wait to see what they do about it.